No matter how fancy a car is on the outside, if it lacked a differential, then it's just a cart without horses for a whole lot of money. Literally. Today I'll tell you about the differential, what it is, why we need it, and how it works. Let's say you're turning a corner. We'll call the wheels closest to the curb the inner wheels, and we'll call the wheels farthest from the curb the outer wheels. So when you're cornering, the outer wheels need to travel a longer distance than the inner wheels. They can do that only if they spin faster and spin more than the inner wheels do. That's where the differential comes in. The main purpose of a differential is to allow the drive wheels to turn at different RPMs while receiving power from the engine. That's why the mechanism is called a differential, because it comes from Latin root word differentia, which means difference. To appreciate the differential, you have to understand what life was like before they had differentials. So imagine a cart or carriage. It has four wheels that are rigidly fixed on two axles, and the front axle is rotatable. As long as it's moving straight, each pair of wheels rotate at the same speed, and there are no problems. But what happens when the horse turns right? Since the wheels are fixed on the axles, when the front axle turns to the right, the left outer wheels must travel a greater distance than the right inner wheels. This means that the inner wheels must slip to accomplish the turn. If the inner wheel were to encounter an obstacle, then it could get stuck and break. So you can see why the earliest carts and carriages were bumpy and unstable. But now let's imagine the same cart or carriage, but this time imagine the wheels aren't fixed to the axle. Instead, the left and right wheels can rotate independently on its own axle and at different speeds. Now when you're cornering, the slip will decrease. Now imagine applying this principle in a car. The story goes that the conventional car differential was invented almost 200 years ago, in 1827. A French mechanical engineer named Onésiphore Pécour patented the modern-day differential gear. Actually, he was working as a watchmaker, and he wanted his cogs to move at different rates. And that's what inspired him to invent the modern-day differential gear. It was first used in steam-driven automobiles, and ultimately became a well-known mechanism when internal combustion engines appeared at the end of the 19th century. There are three main types of differentials. The oldest and most widely used is the open differential. It's also the most common because it's inexpensive, simple, and lightweight. It's also the most reliable, and it requires little maintenance. So how does an open differential work? Power gets transferred from the engine to the drive shaft. At the end of the drive shaft is the pinion gear, which drives the ring gear. The ring gear is connected to a spider gear, which can rotate along the ring gear and each on its own axis. The spider gears are meshed with two side gears. That's how power flows from the pinion to the left and right wheels. When you're driving straight, the spider gears aren't active. It's totally passive. They just ride on the ring gear. So that's why both side gear, and therefore the left and right axles, turn at the same speed. In other words, both left and right drive wheels rotate at the same RPM. Pretty straightforward. But let's turn the car to the right. Now the spider gears become active, and they spin on their own axes. The ring gear drives both axes in a forward rotation. The spider causes the left axle for the outer wheel to rotate faster, and the right axle for the inner wheel to rotate slower. And that's generally how a differential works. The open differential has a downside. Remember, it allows the wheels to spin at different speeds to help in cornering, but it also allows excessive wheel spin when one wheel loses traction. This tricks the system into sending too much torque to the slipping wheel. So you can see that's not good. A locking differential is an open differential that can be locked in place when needed to create a fixed axle. When it's locked, it forces both drive wheels to rotate at the same exact speed regardless of traction needs. You can see this advantage of the locking differential when one of the wheels slips. The locking differential will send torque to both wheels equally, and the wheel with traction will move the car. The differential is locked when the satellite gears stop rotating on their axes and continue to rotate synchronously with the driven gear. We can see this on the inter-wheel and center differentials, either automatic or manual. Manually operated locking differential is performed using a cam clutch, which provides a rigid connector of the differential housing to one of the axle shafts. Clutch is driven by mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, or pneumatic drive directly by the driver. And when a difficult-to-pass section is passed on, or in our case, when the wheel that was on ice or in midair get a grip on the surface, then the driver can disable the feature. Then we have the differential, which can automatically activate and deactivate based on driving conditions. And that's the self-locking or automatic locking differential. Cars that offer the option for a locking differential include Toyota Tacoma and Jeep Wrangler and Mercedes-Benz G-Class SUV. LSDs. The downside to the locking differential is that they don't operate as smoothly as standard differentials and therefore can increase the wear on your tires. Some older ones are known for making a clicking or banging noise as the mechanism locks and unlocks during a turn. Also, automatic locking differentials can affect a car's ability to steer, especially if the locker is located in the front axle and can provide understeering then. So there's the limited slip differential, or LSD. The limited slip differential gives you better off-road traction than an open differential. That's because it allows the wheels to turn at different speeds without locking to each other completely, but also limit the amount of torque sent to the spinning wheel. So the result is you maximize torque to the wheel with the most traction. You'll actually see limited slip differentials on sports cars, drag racers, and all-wheel drive vehicles. Many high-performance cars feature this type of differential. For example, the BMW M3, Ford Mustang, Chevy Camaro, Dodge Challenger, and Subaru WRX. Since LSD reduces power from the slipping wheel and gives more power to the other wheels with traction, this helps prevent tire wear. Also, it wears down your axle shaft less since the system gives them the ability to rotate at various speeds and therefore puts less stress and pressure during turns. Limited slip differentials cost more than standard open differentials, but they aren't too costly. But as with all things, no system is perfect. Limited slip differentials have its share of disadvantages. For example, we've learned by now that when the wheel slips, the LSD reduces power for the slipping wheel. But actually, there's still some small amount going to the slipping wheel. So while you're getting more power to the wheel with traction, nevertheless, it isn't receiving full power, but less than 100%. Another thing to know is, if you're used to driving a car with one kind of limited slip differential, driving won't be the same when you drive another car with another type of limited slip differential. That's because LSDs aren't all the same in all cars, but rather there are electronically controlled variations of LSDs available. Now let's look at Torsen differential, which is a type of limited slip differential. It has an origin in a dual drive differential that was invented and patented by an American, Vernon Gleesman, around 1949. Currently, there are three types of Torsen differentials: the T1, the T2, and guess what? The T3. The T1 is an original equipment in the Audi Quattro, Subaru Impreza WRX STI, Toyota Mega Cruiser, and AM General HMMWV Humvee. Torsen comes from combining the words torque and sensing. It produces the same effect as a limited slip differential, but without the need for clutches or fluid resistance. Its setup is like an open differential, but then you have a layer of worm gearing. What's a worm gear? Basically, it's a gear that's spiral in the form of a screw. The set of worm gears provide the needed resistance to transmit torque needed. It operates based on a simple principle of worm gear, worm wheel, meaning the rotating worm gear can turn the wheel, but a rotating wheel cannot spin the worm gear. It only works one way. The Torsen differential has a housing that's tightly coupled to the driven gear. Inside the body, there are a set of worm gears to which the axle shafts of the right and left wheels are attached. Each end of a worm gear has a spur gear. When you're driving straight, the worm wheels turn the worm gears, so both drive wheels rotate at the same speed. Let's return to the earlier scenario when you're making a right turn. You'll recall the outer wheels need to travel a longer distance than the inner wheels in the same amount of time. So the outer wheels need to rotate faster than the inner wheels, and the inner wheels need to slow down. With the Torsen differential, the worm gear of the left axle, for the faster outer wheel, makes the worm wheel spin on its own axis. Meanwhile, the right axle, for the slower inner wheel, and therefore the right worm wheel, turn in the opposite direction. The meshing spur gears at the end of the worm wheel ensure that the worm wheels spin at the same speed. Well, what about the scenario where one wheel slips and loses traction? Remember, the slipping wheel starts spinning excessively, drawing most of the engine power, and the car can get stuck. With the Torsen differential, the speed gets changed from the worm wheel of the slipping wheel to the worm wheel of the wheel with traction, since they're connected through spur gears. But remember, the worm wheel cannot turn the worm gear. This is what locks the mechanism instantly. So now both left and right wheels turn together and allows a large amount of torque to transfer to the wheel that has more traction. If you have a four-wheel drive, your differential is front and back, while a rear-wheel drive car is a differential and back. You have a front-wheel drive, your differential sits between the front wheels. It's called a transaxle because the functional combination of the front axle and transmission. And if you have an all-wheel drive, then your differential is between both the front and rear wheels with the transfer case in between them. Today we looked at a few types of differentials. There are even more types available, and some of them are variations or derivatives that evolved from the main types. But they all share a similar concept in transmitting the engine's torque to the wheels. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more technology and history videos. Thank you.